So when I first saw the videos about the new BMW XM, my initial reaction was not one of joy. I have grown to strongly dislike most performance SUVs, and this XM is the largest example of everything wrong with the automotive industry, as this is an objectively awful car. So let's see what's wrong with the XM and why performance SUVs as a whole are really awful. So performance SUVs are nothing new, as they've been around for quite a long time. However, they have seen a recent rise in the US, like a serious rise, as in now SUVs and trucks as a whole take up the vast majority of personal vehicle sales in the US. So obviously, to try and tap in with enthusiasts, automakers almost certainly have to make performance variants of their base boring SUVs, right? To be fair, some of these examples like the Explorer ST and the OG Grand Cherokee SRT8 are very moddable and pretty cool vehicles for the drag strip, but these are diamonds in the rough. The majority of performance SUVs are these bland, uninspiring, boring two-row SUVs with some slight tweaks to the exterior design and a new engine, which while yes, works for the majority of applications, it creates a few larger issues, and this new XM is the epitome of every single awful design element in the modern automotive industry. Between the exterior, the interior, and the powertrain, it's just awful. First off, the exterior. The front end looks like Bugs Bunny. The dumbass BMW grille still doesn't look great. But this here, whatever this is, it just looks awful when paired with the grille. I mean, there's a million more things I could go over, like those wheels, but I don't want to waste time. As for the interior, it's allegedly a hyper-luxury car, which I will touch more on later. But that means you get less for more. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean you get a hyper-minimalist interior, and while yes, it's not Tesla levels of bad in terms of minimalism and reliance on screens, the dash is just this barren wasteland. Same with basically the rest of the interior, and people are dumb enough to pay more for this crap? I'm sorry, but I will never understand how people fall for this modernist, minimalist design bullshit. Now on paper, this doesn't look half bad in terms of performance. It uses a twin-turbo V8 paired with a hybrid battery cell to crank out 738 horsepower, which is more than those Trackhawks and Hellcat Durangos. And unlike the Trackhawks, it's almost certainly going to get at least somewhat decent fuel mileage because of the hybrid power cell, which by the way is a plug-in hybrid system. So that means you can even drive it on electric only for roughly 30 miles or so. And that V8 is the same 4.4 liter V8 found in other BMW M SUVs as well. So there is most likely going to be some sort of aftermarket support for this car, meaning we could see some really cool potential in the coming months. Now all of that is great until you look at the starting price. Now you would assume even fully optioned out, a rig like this wouldn't go over $120 or maybe $140,000, right? Yeah, no, wrong. Not only does this go over, this starts at 160 grand, and that's just what it starts at. If you want to get all the high horsepower fancy crap that I just talked about, this is going to start at $180,000, almost $200,000 for this heaping pile of horse shit. This is one of the very few examples of cars where I could actually feel myself getting honestly very angry when I first heard about it. What are you paying for? We already discussed the fact that the interior is no different than any other BMW, and the engine isn't bespoke or special to just this car. It's used in a lot of other BMWs as well. I would understand if it had the same power plant and was an Alpina with the premium Alpina interior. Maybe at least from a cost standpoint, I could kind of understand the incredibly large price tag, but it isn't. It's just a BMW, and it uses the same basic interior components as every other BMW, meaning that BMW are just charging out of their ass because, well, they can. Because they know the target audience buying this car doesn't actually care about performance, they just care about appearances. They want to flex the most expensive and fastest car at their kids' Little League game parking lots, not take it to the drag strip or even, dare I say it, the racetrack. Now, this BMW XM exposes a larger issue in the American automotive industry, and that's the infestation of SUVs and light to heavy duty trucks, and in turn, performance SUVs. Not leaving out performance trucks because they are actually useful off-road, even if 95% of the people who own them never so much as take them down a gravel road, let alone off-road them, but that's not the point for this video. The point is that SUVs take up way too much of American auto sales, and it means that we're missing out on awesome vehicles. But why is that? Why are we so obsessed with SUVs? And how does America's obsession with SUVs mean us enthusiasts don't get awesome cars like the M3 Touring? Well, to answer the first question, the reason why we buy so many SUVs is pretty simple. It saves car companies a lot of money. A very basic crash course is that there's a set of regulations in the US called CAFE regulations, which essentially regulate how much emissions a car can emit. However, there are very lenient exceptions for light trucks, which are vehicles like Ram 15 and 2500s, Ford F1 and F250s, and most SUVs, in the eyes of regulators, check the box as a light-duty vehicle, meaning that SUVs and crossovers are considered exempt from CAFE regulations, meaning car companies don't have to spend more money researching new tech for smaller cars to conform with CAFE regulations. So in the 90s and into the 2000s, car companies pushed hard to convince the American public that SUVs were a better choice in terms of safety, storage, and more, even though most of these turned out to be false claims. Anyways, this is what has led us down the long and twisty road to these god-awful performance SUVs, as almost every example of a performance SUV, including this absolutely terrible brand new XM, XM is an absolutely terrible performance car. They don't do well in any track setting, especially for the price you're paying on most of these. That money could easily be spent on other cooler cars, but that's not all. As because there are more SUVs with lax emission regulations, instead of tightening emission regulations on these SUVs, the government tightens emission regulations on cars, which means enthusiasts suffer. And if you think about it, that means that in practice, cafe regulations only make the environment worse. But that's again not the only area we enthusiasts suffer in. See, if you look overseas, especially in Europe, there aren't nearly as many SUVs on their roads compared to here. Well, then how the hell do they haul around their little spawns of Satan and fit stuff in the trunk? Simple, they use wagons, which the US used to do until those pesky cafe regulations came into play. But because the average American uses SUVs and not wagons, that means US automotive manufacturers have no desire to make wagons because they know, to be fair, no one would buy them. And foreign manufacturers don't want to bring them here because, again, no one would buy them. Hence why our wagon market has been on life support since the 90s. Meaning in that time, we could have gotten awesome cars like the Evo wagon, the M3 Touring, the RS4 wagon, and more. And no, I don't care. You do not need a massive SUV to haul all your stuff. I promise you, anything an SUV does, a wagon can and will do better in every way. And to bring it back to the original point of the video, that's what this XM stands for. I mean, even from the press pictures, you could tell this thing is absolutely massive. But it's still supposed to be a performance vehicle? In what world? How the hell can something this big ever be seen as a viable track car or a beast at the drag strip? I can't imagine, especially with the hybrid tech, that something this large is going to be anything even close to light in weight. It's just an excuse to charge more for something 100% of the buyers will never be able to fully utilize: the power plant. That's not me doubting the ability of BMW M drivers to drive like asshats, it's just the car itself and the types of people who are going to be buying this thing. But again, the worst offenders have to be automotive journalists, as Car and Driver hasn't even gotten the car yet and still rated it an 8 out of 10. How the fuck does that work? When I say that on paper this car looks like it's going to be one of the worst performance cars of the decade, I mean it. And even if I actually got the car to review, I can't imagine that this thing is going to be any good, even if it handles like an M3, as it's way too much money. I'm sorry, I just can't get over that 160 grand for what? An X7M with a slight redesign? It's got almost the exact same interior as every other BMW, so what are you paying for? The engine? I feel like an engine swap should cost less than 160 grand. I'm sorry, this whole video has gone off the rails. I don't even know, I'm so screwed up about this car, I don't even know what to say. I guess overall the new XM gets an 1 broken turn signal out of 10. Sure, why not?